Good morning, I'm BRAHM RESNIK. Welcome to a special Sunday Square Off. Today, our exclusive interview with Senator and candidate John McCain. 6 years ago, John McCain may have been the most popular politician in America, easily reelected to the Senate.
He's got the appeal to independents and Democrats.
Back in 2004, a lot of people didn't expect McCain would be campaigning for the Senate ever again.
I think it'll be a good move for him and for the country.
A run for president was considered a foregone conclusion. 4 years later, the senator won the Republican nomination, but lost the election.
I had the honor of calling Senator Barack Obama to congratulate him.
Now he's back on the campaign trail, not in New Hampshire or South Carolina, but in places like Mesa and Thatcher. And it's not the Democrats he's fighting against this time, it's members of his own party.
Our Congress is doing things that are not constitutional, and we're watching them.
Can he fight off Tea Party activists while holding on to the support of independents and Republican voters who consistently re-elect him? And good morning, Senator. Thanks so much for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure as always. 1 year ago, Americans, most of them were hopeful. Now, many of them, if you see the poll numbers, are just plain angry at Congress and, frankly, at incumbents like you. I guess my first question is, why do you want to run again in this kind of climate?
Well, I think that the primary reason is because Arizona is hurting more than they ever have before. We're in two wars. This nation is in peril both at home and abroad. And very briefly, Arizonans need somebody who is effective. I have been proven to be effective, and I've taken on the leadership of my own party as well as the other party. Also, I would point out that when Republicans regain control of the Senate, I'll be chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
When Republicans? You're pretty confident of that.
You know, if you and I had been having this conversation a year ago, I would have said no. Now I believe that there is a very reasonable scenario that we can.
Let's talk about that voter anger and about your poll numbers, which are quite surprising. Back in January, the Rocky Mountain poll found 41% of Arizonans approved of your performance in the Senate. That's your lowest rating in 16 years since the Keating 5 scandal. And as you started your last Senate run back in 04, you can see there your approval rating was in the 60s and historically had been in the 60s and 70s. What do you think has brought those numbers down?
Well, actually, the polling numbers we have, our numbers are quite good, and the overall positive ratings in the 70s. And look, but your point is well made. Americans are very angry at Washington, and they're angry at a lot of incumbents because we have been disconnected. You just showed the shots of a young woman at the Tea Party. She epitomizes the frustration and anger that people feel. And by the way, I have a lot of support amongst Tea Party people, a lot of support, because I've fought against earmark and pork barrel spending, and that's one of their big issues. And of course, I've fought against tax increases, and I've led the fight against Obamacare, against the so-called health care reform in the Senate, and they've seen that, and that's why I'm been very effective for Arizona.
And let's talk about that a little bit. Democratic Senator Evan Bayh announced his retirement this past week. His parting shot was Washington is irretrievably broken. There's absolutely no hope of bipartisanship. You were Mr. Bipartisan for a long time. Is bipartisanship dead?
No, but certainly when you have an administration that comes to power with 60 votes in the Senate, a majority in the House, they decide to ram through legislation. That's what they did on the quote stimulus package, which I fought against and brought up the counter proposal of Republicans. So if they want to sit down and truly negotiate, something I've done for years, fine. But if they want to just ram things through or try to pick off a Republican or two, then obviously there's no bipartisanship. But I would also say that I worked with Senator Bayh on a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution and other spending cuts. I worked with Senator Levin on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've worked on a lot of issues, continue to do on a bipartisan basis. But yes, the environment is poisoned. But when the Democrats and President Obama try to ram things through without consulting us, then there can't be bipartisanship.
They are a majority. They want a pretty hefty majority. Yes. Didn't the voters speak and say, we want you, the Democrats, to carry out our wishes?
Well, you can interpret it that way, and I think they did. But what President Obama said on the campaign was that we will be, quote, change in Washington. 8 times during the campaign, he said, I'll have the C-SPAN cameras in to watch the negotiations. You know that. And yet, interestingly, behind closed doors, they put in all these sleazy sausage-making deals, the Cornhusker kickback, the Louisiana Purchase, all this. I know you want to get to other questions. The process they went through, BRAHM, was so sleazy, the worst I have ever seen. So the American people rejected not only the product, which is a $2.5 trillion debt on future generations of Americans, but the process they went through in direct contradiction to the president's promise.
I want to get to this before we get to our break. You know, I spoke to a lot of voters for this interview and just do, regularly as part of my job. And one thing that surprised me was many say they don't know, after 28 years in Congress, the House and the Senate, who John McCain is politically. You hear words like maverick, reach across the aisle guy, a stray conservative, a rhino, a liberal, and much, much worse than that. I'm sure you've heard them all. So tell us, who is John McCain politically right now? What is your guiding star?
What this comes out to is Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, Republican. That's what I've been consistently throughout. And when my party has strayed, which they did in the Bush administration by letting spending get completely out of control, I fought against the earmarks, I fought against the pork barrel projects, and I will fight for the things that I believe in. So sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder, but I've been guided by a set of principles, Republican conservative principles, that has dictated my behavior. And by the way, Arizona's a pretty independent state. We've got a lot of people here who are
becoming more independent by the day.
Exactly. And they think for themselves, and they want somebody representing them that thinks for himself.
All right, Senator John McCain. We'll have to end it right there for our first block. When we come back, Senator McCain on the issues.